Hello, welcome to Ditch the Dry month here at ProDog Raw. If you're a dog owner who'd like to feel equipped to make the best nutritional choices for your dog, then you are in exactly the right place. My name's Anna actually, and this is Alison, and we're both part of the ProDog team. Even forgot my name then for a minute, getting too overexcited. We've got an amazing guest joining us in just a few minutes as well, all the way from North Carolina. We're going to be talking Ditch the Dry, Kick the Kibble to the Curb. Ditch the Dry has officially gone international. Whilst we wait for people to join live, big welcome to those of you who are watching this back. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending what time of day you are watching or listening in. Regardless when you're watching, still get involved in the conversation in the comments. This page is always monitored, so if you do ask a question, one of the ProDog team will get back to you. I can see there are a few people now joining live, so big welcome to you. Welcome to Ditch the Dry month here at ProDog Raw. All month we're sharing tips and inspiration to raise awareness about the immense benefits to your dog of ditching the dry processed foods and switching to a fresh, natural diet. We're bringing experts to you live throughout the month, and today we've got a fab guest joining us in just a couple of minutes. If you are a dog owner who'd like to feel equipped to make the best nutritional choices for your dog, then you are in exactly the right place. My name's Anna, this is Alison, we're part of the ProDog team. So whether you have already ditched the dry or you're yet to make that switch, I have no doubt that we will be chatting about some stuff that will be pretty eye-opening for you. If you have already ditched the dry and you are a raw feeder, we really encourage you to join the conversation in the comments, share your own experiences and knowledge, because you could really be helping somebody else out. And if you're not yet a raw feeder, but you would like to start taking a more natural approach to your dog's diet, then you are in the right place. This is definitely the conversation to be a part of today and all month on our social media pages. And just before we get into that, I'll just give you a bit of background about Ditch the Dry. So we're now in our third year, and we set up the campaign because we just recognise there's so many dogs out there that are not yet experiencing the health benefits of a natural diet. And we knew that one of the main reasons for that is sometimes raw feeding can seem a little bit baffling. There's so many myths, misconceptions, misinformation, and of course opinions out there. So we do totally understand why it might seem complex. And Ditch the Dry is designed just to share the facts about canine nutrition, to share tips on how to make a successful switch from feeding dry food over to feeding a natural diet, and to also tackle some of those myths. So if you stick around to the end, we've got some really great free resources to help get you started if you decide now is the time to ditch the dry. We're just about to introduce our very special guest in just a moment. But if you do have friends, family, neighbours who are dog owners and you think that they would be open to this conversation, then please share our page with them, share the lives. Really encourage you to get involved in the conversation too. If you've got specific questions, we've got the ProDog team in the comments as we speak, and they'll be getting back to you either during the live, straight after. And we also will have a look through the comments after, because we love to read back through the comments, see your chatter in there. So hit the like button so we know that you are with us. Let us know where in the world you're watching from as well. And also, if you are a raw feeder already, drop into the comments how long you have been feeding raw for, and just anything that you wish that you had been told when you first made that move from feeding a processed diet to a raw feeding diet, because that could really help somebody else out. So with that is enough of me. Over to Alison. She's going to introduce our our guest.
Yes, I did try and memorize all this, but there's so much information there that I thought I better just do a proper introduction. So our next guest for this week's Ditch the Drive has recently retired from veterinary clinical practice. She focuses on educating and empowering as many people as possible to be confident with providing a natural and holistic approach to their pets. She is a speaker, a campaigner, and provides lots of brilliant online content, and her daily lives are listened to all over the world. These lives as well are also famous for the very odd rant, which we all love because her passion for real food is priceless. She's a big advocate for getting the raw message out that it's a natural diet, isn't complicated, and doesn't need to be overly expensive. And hence her famous pup loaf recipe is fed worldwide to thousands and thousands of pets. She is also a certified veterinary acupuncturist, chiropractor, and a best-selling author of 4 books. Our guest has spent her life rescuing dogs, cats, donkeys, horses, and a special love for the Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. She is Chief Medical Officer for the amazing Monkey House Senior Dog Hospice, which provides end-of-life, loving care for homeless dogs with terminal illnesses, which is amazing. Wife to Hugh, mum to Gwen, and granny to Sarah, we are delighted to welcome the legend as is Dr. Judy Morgan.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Judy. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know that this is perfect timing for you because I'm aware that you've also dedicated the month of August on your own channels to talking about the pet industry. And that you've got your own campaign, Kick the Kibble to the Curb, which is going to be running on your pages next week. We are going to be sharing all the links so people can check out what you're up to as well at the end. But why is this a topic that's so close to your heart, Judy? What's the reason that people should be considering ditching the dry and moving to a natural approach to their dog's food?
It's really interesting how I stumbled into this because when I went to veterinary college, which it hasn't changed at all, our amount of nutrition that we were taught was very, very, very little. And everything is sponsored by big pet food companies. And even our internal medicine classes were literally taught by, oh, if an animal has kidney disease, you use this prescription diet. If they have heart disease, you use this prescription diet. And that's how I practiced medicine for the first 10 years. I didn't know that there was another way to do things. And I could never figure out, at the time I was really into Dobermans, not Cavaliers. And I could never figure out why my Dobermans had icky coats and, they were just dry, that the gas could just clear the room. Like we just thought, okay, these dogs are just a mess. And when I took my first acupuncture course, they nicknamed the kidney diet that was prescribed so often as killer diet. And I'm like, what are they talking about? And so then I really started investigating pet food and what the ingredient definitions really are and what is in there and what's so bad. Like I was, on search engines looking for all these different things and investigating food, and then started talking to other people, and then somehow came across Susan Thixton at Truth About Pet Food, who has been our consumer advocate at AFCO for the last dozen years. Mm-hmm. And I attended, at her urging, I attended my first AFCO meeting, and it was shockingly eye-opening. And about maybe a little before that, when I was doing all my research, I discovered Ian Billinghurst's barf diet, which was a raw diet available here in the US. And it was the only one I could find. So I said, well, I'm going to order some and I'm going to try this for my dogs. And at that point, I had both Dobermans and Cavaliers. Amazingly, the dogs just, everything changed. The coach changed. There was no more gas. Their stools were better. It's just, everything was better. And I went, wow, there might be something to this. And believe me, I was one of those veterinarians when people would come in, and because I was just starting to dabble in the holistic, and people would come into me and they'd say, what about feeding raw to my dog? And I had swallowed everything hook, line, and sinker. And I was like, oh, we got to worry about bacteria. It might not be safe. Yeah. And I did the whole line because I didn't know any better. And then I started feeding it to my dogs and I started learning more. And I just said, oh my gosh, like somebody kick me for everything that I said for the past 10 years about pet food. So it's a process, it's a journey. It's kind of what we all, probably most people who are now feeding raw, who used to feed kibble, had to go through that same journey, that same process. Listen to the naysayers. We all spout the reasons why we shouldn't go there, and then we go there and go, oh, I was wrong. So that was sort of my journey. It took, it was a few year process of really kind of getting through that. But once you know what's really going on in the pet food industry, you
Yeah.
don't ever look at it the same again.
And it's really interesting. I was listening to one of your lives last week, and you were talking about some statistics that sounded really hopeful, because it was the percentage of how many people in the US are now feeding.
Yeah, that was a Canadian survey.
Oh,
It was done in Ontario at the University of Guelph, and it was 66% of dog owners reported feeding raw food to their dogs, and something like 53% of cat owners. It was a crazy number. I was shocked when I found that. I was like, yay, people in Ontario.
Yeah, 'cause I think it's in the UK. I think it's only about still 10%. I'm sure.
Yeah, I think overall in the US, I keep saying between 10 and 15%, but I haven't seen good statistics on that. And this was just a survey that was put out by the veterinary college at Guelph in Ontario. So, the veterinary colleges are not looking for that answer. The veterinary colleges were probably looking for 95% of the people are feeding kibble. It didn't come out that way, which was cool.
Do you know what struck me though was the language that was used in those statistics, because it referred to traditional and non-traditional food, didn't it? And when it spoke about traditional, it was talking about processed food as being traditional and raw as being non-traditional.
Right.
But when you actually think about the evolution of the canine species and what is traditional, what's non-traditional, it should really be the other way around, shouldn't it?
Well, it should. I mean, evolutionarily, they ate raw prey and, farm scraps and leftovers, from coexisting with humans for many, 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 many thousands of years before they were offered processed food. So processed food is in the evolutionary history of feeding dogs and cats is just a blip on the radar.
It really is. So what's the main reasons that people watching this today, so those people who are sat watching this that are feeding their dog processed dry food, what are the main things you'd like them just to consider thinking about?
Well, one of the things that we really need to look at is if we look at where dogs fall on the continuum of carnivore, omnivore, herbivore. We know they're not herbivores, yet many of these dry pet food companies are so heavily filled with grains and legumes and potatoes, which falls in the herbivore part of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Our dogs, we know they can survive on that. Clearly, they've been doing it. It's just, do we want to survive or do we want to thrive? Mm-hmm. But they're really supposed to be metasauruses, and dry kibble cannot contain more than about 30% meat if it goes through the extrusion process of making kibble, which is a very high heat, high pressure processing. It's a pretty cool process if you ever get a chance to actually see it or find a video that shows how it's done. But it can't have a lot of meat in it because it gunks up the machine. It gets all sticky and it doesn't make that hard little dry brown nugget that they're trying to come up with, unless they have dyes in there and then it's red or yellow or green, whatever they put in there. But our dogs are not meant to eat that. Our dogs on the evolutionary scale are very carnivorous. Yes, they do eat some plant material, but they really are very carnivorous, and we're not getting that in dry food. So we're not feeding them what they're meant to eat. We also, so many things happen in that processing. We end up through the high heat process, we go through Maillard reactions, and we get all these byproducts that are actually carcinogenic. So we look at cancer percentages in our dogs today. It's like 1.6 out of every 2 dogs over age 10 are going to have a cancer diagnosis. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Why are we having so much cancer? Why is that number growing exponentially every year? And we have to look at diet as the foundation of where things are going wrong to begin with. There's a lot of other things that are being done in the veterinary profession that are also contributing to this disaster that we are seeing. But we have to start with nutrition as the basis for everything. So our dogs are not meant to digest high starch diets, but that's what we're feeding them. They are meant to have a high moisture diet. Look at prey. If they went out and took down a deer, caught a mouse, ate a rabbit, whatever that wild prey is, it's going to be 75 to 80% moisture. Dry kibble is 6% moisture.
Mhm.
So when we feed them this dry processed diet, where does the moisture come from to digest that food? Well, dogs who are fed kibble drink a lot more. They have to. They have no choice. Whereas when we switch dogs over to raw food, I get people emailing me all the time going, "Oh my gosh, my dog's not drinking any water. How do I get him to drink?" He doesn't need to. He's doing just fine. He's getting moisture in his diet. So the kibble-fed dogs, and this is one of the things that we think is associated with bloat as well in those large breed deep-chested dogs, is they eat their bowl of kibble and then they have to go drink a whole bunch of water in order for that kibble to actually break down and, kind of go through the washing machine process in the stomach where it's ground up and all that. They have to have moisture to do that. They can't, they can throw stomach acid at it, but there has to be moisture in there to make it mix around and do its thing. If they don't have, and they have a hard time, for every cup of food, I did the math once and I can't remember the exact numbers, but for every cup of dry kibble, in order to rehydrate it to what a raw meal would be, it's something like 2 gallons of water for every cup of food. They can't drink enough to rehydrate it. So where does all that moisture come from? It comes from intracellular water in the body. So these dogs literally, it's worse for kitty cats because they don't drink. It literally is a state of kind of constant low-grade dehydration. And then we wonder why the kidneys are failing early. It has nothing to do with protein. I'll save that for the myths. But so there's so many reasons why dry kibble is just absolutely inappropriate for them. It leads to so many problems.
It's that thing, we could literally talk about this for 2 hours, couldn't we? If not all day.
I mean, we were talking about fats beforehand, but we'll leave that for the myths bit at the end on the fats in kibble v raw, definitely. So basically, if one of our customers or anybody that's been feeding kibble for a long period of time and they want to make the switch to raw, what would be your successful tips on a successful switch, really?
Well, I've had this conversation with a lot of people. We're working on a dog nutrition summit right now. So I've had this discussion and everybody has their own way of doing this. I can just tell you what has worked for me in the past. And I don't know if I recommend this or not, because, I'm a veterinarian. If things go south, I can fix it pretty quickly. But I've never had it go south. So we have done a lot of rescue over the years. We have fostered a lot of dogs, and almost every dog who has come into our house has been a rescue dog that has come from a really bad situation. So they're either puppy mill breeders or survivors, or they're dogs that are coming from, shelter situations with lots of medical problems. So we get in these kind of disaster. Some of them have even been owner surrenders that are complete disasters because the owners couldn't afford to do what needed to be done. But every dog who has come to our house has come as a kibble-fed dog. With all, in the puppy mill, there's no way they're going to feed anything other than, crappy dry kibble that is, usually on a timed delivery system. So when they come to our house, they come with this laundry list of problems, and sometimes we know what they've been fed. Most of the time we don't. So we don't even have a brand of kibble. We had 2 dogs that we adopted, and they came with a plastic shoebox full of dry kibble filled with maggots. Oh, this is what we've been feeding the dogs. perfect. I mean, I guess the maggots were giving them protein. But needless to say, it went in the trash. So I do not own any kibble in my house. If you bring a dog for me to foster and you go, okay, he's been eating XYZ brand of dry kibble, I can't do a slow switch because I don't have any and I'm not going to go buy any. So for me, when they come in, it's like, hey guys, guess what? We're having real meat for dinner and you don't have an option. This is all we got. So now a lot of them, if they've been fed dry kibble their entire life, when you put raw food in front of them, and we always warm it up to at least room temperature or body temperature, they shouldn't eat it cold, they don't recognize it as food. Yeah. It doesn't have a hard crunch. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to pick it up. They smell it and they're like, I don't know. And so a lot of times I'll have to put some in their mouth and actually get them to kind of taste it a little bit. But a lot of times it comes back out because they don't recognize the texture. That is pretty sad. Like we've taken our dogs who are meant to eat raw meat and they don't even recognize that as food anymore. So a lot of times what I end up having to do is I have to gently cook some food for them, gently cook some meat. I still leave it, pretty bloody and mostly raw. But a lot of times if I do that, just that little bit, it's enough for them to go, might be food. And so if we do that for a couple of days where it's gently cooked, then usually within 48 hours, I can have them on full raw meals. So I have never, ever had a dog develop diarrhea or vomiting or any kind of problem with a quick change. Now I know that other people talking about doing the slow transition, 25% of this and 75% of that. And, we do that over a period of a couple of weeks. And there are some dogs whose guts are just so trashed that if you change one little thing, you give them, one piece of broccoli and they go, and, develop diarrhea. But it's because their guts are just so trashed.
And they've only ever been used to one poor source of food. I think that's half the
problem. Exactly. So they're
anything good. It's just like,
yeah, their microbiome is just a mess. They have a lot of inflammation. They have leaky gut. They just have so many problems going on. And I have done this even, frankly, with most of my patients. If you come in with a dog who has serious IBD, I had one case, that one of my first ones that I dealt with that had probably the worst IBD case I ever had. This dog should have weighed 80 pounds. He weighed 40. He was only 2 years old. So he's a pretty good sized dog. Literally standing in my office, the dog couldn't stop throwing up and having liquid diarrhea. And he was being treated by the university he was on a laundry list of drugs, immunosuppressants, and antibiotics and everything else that they throw at these dogs with IBD. He was on a prescription hydrolyzed kibble and literally spewing from both ends in my office. And I looked at the owner who was a nurse and I said, what's going on? And she said, well, the university won't see him anymore because they're not making any progress and nothing is working and they don't know what to do anymore. And I said, you're willing to take a leap of faith? And she said, well, I got to do something. He's dying. He's 40 pounds. And I said, all right, we're going to stop everything. Now the prednisone, unfortunately, we had to do kind of a weaning, but we did a fast wean because you just can't stop steroids just like that. So, but everything else, I said, nope, that's all going out the window. And, we started them on natural supplements. We started them on some B12 and some digestive enzymes and some other things to get things turned around. And we went immediately to a raw diet. And she said, don't I have to do a slow switch? I said, well, clearly what you're doing is not working. Why would you feed that one more meal? She's like, yeah, well, he's just going to throw it up anyway. I said, So we went to a raw beef diet and that 40-pound dog had to eat 4 pounds a day in order to satisfy him. Yeah. And the vomiting and diarrhea stopped in 24 hours. Gone. Never came back. So over time, we were able to wean down the amount of food that he needed to be fed. And that dog literally has been an 80-pounder for the past 10 years. We cured him. And it was an overnight switch because if you're feeding something that's not working, why would you feed it one more day? It makes no sense at all. And thankfully, this owner was willing to take that leap of faith. And she kind of went, well, it can't get worse. And I said, no, it can't.
Yeah, I mean, we have this, and when customers are saying, well, he's got a really, really, really sensitive stomach. So, and I sort of say, well, that food, obviously, if he's got a sensitive stomach on that food, then you've really got no, don't just take the risk because you're going to get benefits. You're not going to make him worse. So,
right.
So, yeah.
And we were talking about this at the beginning, weren't we? About just making those changes and then just really observing your dog, how your dog responds. Do they look better? Do they seem better? Have they got more energy? Are their toilet habits better? That is the best test of whether a diet is successful or not, isn't it? And we at ProDog, Alison's our lead nutrition expert. So anyone out there who is on the fence, would like some advice, then please feel free at any point to message in on. You can message us via Messenger here on Facebook. You can email in at customer-services@prodog.raw.com. The team will share these links in the comments. So if you are on the fence, message in, and that it doesn't matter whether you're thinking of becoming a ProDog customer or not. That doesn't matter at all. If you are just thinking that moving towards a natural diet for your dog is the way to go, and you would just like some advice on those first steps, or you've got specific concerns, then message in. We don't mind which brand you choose to use. Our aim really with Ditch the Dry is to help support as many dog owners as possible to make that move to a natural diet. And Judy, as you were talking then, as you were telling your story about those foster dogs coming to you, I was thinking, for a dog, what a dream home to land in, isn't it? From a health and happiness perspective, that must be a dream for any dog.
Well, actually, I got turned down. There was one rescue group I was doing a lot of work with, and I got turned down to foster more dogs because they said, well, you always want to keep them. And I'm like, why is this a problem? I pay their adoption fee. Why is this a problem? Maybe they thought I was becoming a hoarder. The most we ever had was 13 dogs. Right now I have 13 cats. I'd rather have 13 dogs.
Oh, you've got the kittens, haven't you? The kittens.
Yes, there's many.
And all of this that we're talking about, I don't want to sort of complicate things too much, but this applies to cats as well, doesn't it? I mean,
more so.
Yeah, because they are carnivores, aren't they, cats?
Absolutely. They are obligate carnivores.
Yeah.
We keep trying to feed them corn. It makes no sense.
No.
Yeah.
No. So
and we wonder why they have so many medical issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the other pressing questions that we get asked quite a lot from pet parents that are worried about transitioning to raw is obviously the bacteria, the salmonella. And as I say, I said before, didn't I? I've raw fed for 16 years. My dogs are long haired, they're doodles, they've got beards, I get snogged, you name it. And I have only ever had a bad stomach off a dodgy curry down the road. So I'll leave that for you to explain, Dr. Judy.
I have never had bacterial problems and I have fed so many different brands of raw dog food, and I've made so much of my own raw dog food, and we have never had a bacterial problem. And when I wrote my first book, that one, The Needles to Natural, I looked up the statistics on how many people had been made sick from bacterial contamination in pet food, comparing kibble to raw. And many more people have been made sick from handling contaminated kibble than raw food. And, it's different for every country, but here in the United States, FDA has zero tolerance for any bacteria in raw food. So they test raw food all the time. They never test they rarely test the kibble products. But when they do, it's like, oh, look at that. We've got salmonella. We've got E. coli. We've got all kinds of problems. And the FDA somehow mistakenly believes that people have no idea how to handle raw meat, even though they do it for their families every single day. And they talk about, we did a video last week with the folks from Viva Raw on safe handling of the raw pet food, literally from sourcing to the time it gets into your home and is fed to your pet, and the steps that are gone through because FDA is so biased in their testing and their opinions, and the AVMA and AHA and, all of these vet associations and pet food. It's because, the big pet food folks are afraid of losing their market share, which is happening. Yay. But the people don't worry about children crawling around on the floor and playing in the kibble that's in the bowl or eating pieces of the kibble, which, by the way, has just as good a chance of being contaminated.
Yeah.
But, people that feed raw food to their dogs, they generally don't have their toddlers playing in the, first of all, the dogs don't leave it in the bowl more than 3 seconds. It's gone. So, but you don't leave it out and have your children handling it and playing with it and eating it. Now, I said to the Viva Raw folks when we did this video the other day, I was like, so I am like the worst person in the world to do a video on safe handling of raw pet food, because I have zero worries about it. Zero worries. So I handle it less safely than anybody I know. My 2-year-old granddaughter will come in while we're feeding the dogs, and Stewie, who has all these issues with heart failure, kidney failure, PLE, blah, blah, blah. I have to hand feed him. So she literally will come in, get down on the floor. She's reaching in the raw dog food, putting it in the dog's mouth, handing it to him. Then she gets up and runs across the room, and Lord knows where her hands go between, when she gets away from me and when I catch her. And it's just not an issue. It is not a problem. So, and don't do what I do. Do as I say, not as I do. Please handle your raw food safely. But I just don't worry about it. I have a good immune system. My granddaughter has a good immune. My kids grew up in a barn. They would clean stalls and eat a sandwich. It's just the way it is. It's called soil probiotics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we actually I say once a year, it's probably more frequently than that, but where it's come to my attention, it seems to be every summer in the mainstream media in the UK, we have this article about some sort of research that proves that what was the one recently? That was about
the recent one that said that pathogenic E. coli was found in raw-fed dogs, except it was the worst study in the world. Susan Clifton did the greatest rebuttal about it. It's like, 128 dogs came up. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's something, over 100 dogs came up positive. They only mentioned the 34 who were raw fed. Well, what was everybody else eating?
Yeah, and
we'll just ignore that.
And it's that thing, once you start to actually, not take these things on a surface level and actually look at where did the research come from, what standard of research was it, who funded it, that we could talk about that topic all day, the politics of it all, but we won't.
You can get the results you're looking for if you're looking for a certain thing, even with the DCM study. The cardiologists were told only to report cases of DCM in dogs who were eating what they call the BEG diets, which is a stupid acronym anyway. So, if your dog was raw fed, that's considered a BEG diet. So you need to report that. If he's fed dry kibble, we don't report those. Now, how is that a valid study? How is that valid at all? Okay, let's say there's 10,000 dogs in the US that get dilated cardiomyopathy a year. Well, if we ignore breed predisposition, and if we ignore 3/4 of the ones who are fed something that they're in favor of, and we're only reporting the ones who are eating what they're not in favor of, how is that a valid study? Everything is so skewed. You can find what you want, just skew your study.
Exactly. So, Dr. Judy, if somebody's out there watching and they've been to their vet and their vet's told them that raw's bad, and they're reading these media articles about raw being bad, but there's something within them that's saying, but to me,
it makes sense.
What would your advice be to those people?
You know what? I would say read Dr. Connor Brady's book, Feeding Your Dogs. I think that's what it's called. Read the studies that are out there. It's really interesting. And Dr. Connor Brady, he's from Ireland. He's like amazing because he has that science brain and he likes to read studies and pick them apart. I like reading his interpretation. But if I had to read the study and pick it apart, it's like, oh my, and he probably read thousands, literally thousands.
Oh, it's a brilliant reference book. Brilliant.
Oh my gosh, it is so amazing. But all the studies that point toward processed food being good for our pets are so skewed. There are very few of them, by the way. Like Big Pet Food just came out with these products and just said they were good and everybody just believed them because they have great marketing budgets. There's no science to back it up. Like so little science to back it up. So it's thank you, Feeding Dogs. Oh, I'm guessing my daughter is on there posting things. Thanks, Gwen.
We've got the team. If the team are there, if you could put a post in the comments as well to Dr.
Yeah, Connor's book's on our Ditch to Drive landing page anyway. So
Okay.
yeah, we all have Connor's book at ProDog.
Yeah. So that's an amazing resource. And somebody I was interviewing the other day said, gift your veterinarian that book. Yeah. And, it's interesting because for a lot of years, people were gifting they still are, from needles to natural, which is, there's a lot about pet food in there, but also just natural therapies for different things and supplements and using that. So, when you take things to your veterinarian and say, well, I didn't make all this up. Look, here's some facts behind it. And then the other thing is to say to them, and somebody brought this up the other day, I thought it was great. You know what? If your veterinarian's totally against it, you could say to them, I'm going to do a 60-day trial or a 90-day trial, 30-day, whatever it is. And if things go south in that 30 to 90 days, I'll come back here with my tail between my legs and say, oh, geez, maybe you were right. It's not going to go south, so you don't have to worry about that. But, I'll come back in 90 days. You can do blood work on my dog. You can see what their coat looks like. I'll bring you a stool sample, whatever. And just say, I'm just going to give this a 90-day trial. Could you be on board with a 90-day trial? Yeah. And most veterinarians would say, okay, but when your dog gets diarrhea or when your family gets sick, I get to say, I told you so. And you can say, okay.
I think the biggest compliment I've ever had is I've got like a large breed, 15-and-a-half-year-old Labradoodle, and he's been raw fed since he was 10 weeks. And my vet's a brilliant vet, but she's not on the raw feeding holistic side at all. And she's been with me the whole journey with my dogs. And she actually has to admit now, she just says, whatever you're doing, Alison, just carry on doing it. He's amazing for his age. And that is, I just sort of go, I'll take that as a compliment, when
yeah, absolutely. The cardiologist that when I lived in New Jersey, that we have used for our dogs and that I've used for my patients for the past 35 years, we've become good buddies. And it's funny when when somebody that's my patient or my recommendation goes to him for a echocardiogram, he'll say, okay, well, here's the medications I prescribe. And then whatever Dr. Morgan says to do, you do that, because my dogs out-survive, he's like Stewie, who's been in heart failure for 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November. He gave him 3 months to live 2 years ago. Wow. And, I talked to him the other day and I was like, hey, Mike, that dog that you said would live 3 months, he's still going strong. And he's like, just do whatever it is I don't know what you do, but just keep doing it. And part of that is, they're fed a heart healthy raw diet. If you have dogs with heart problems, feed a heart healthy raw diet. Meat. They need meat. They need organs.
So we've got a few minutes left before we end. Let's get in some more myths. What are those myths that really get your goat, Dr. Judy?
So one of them we kind of touched on. There's a myth that dry food or processed food is safer, that it has less bacteria. That's false. We already discussed that one. Huge myth that's out there, kind of with the DCM thing, that dogs need carbohydrates, that dogs need grains in their diet. They absolutely do not need grains in their diet. The big pet food companies would like us to believe that corn is just as good as a protein source as meat is. It is not. It is absolutely not. Dogs use fats and proteins as their energy source, not carbohydrates. There's a myth that dry kibble will keep your dog's teeth clean. No, dry kibble is actually going to promote more tartar on the teeth because of it breaks down to sugar. Carbohydrates break down to sugar. It changes the bacterial population in the mouth. We get more tartar. We get more dental disease versus dogs that are fed raw or raw meaty bones. And I saw somebody said, their dog kind of missed the crunch of the kibble. We'll feed them some raw meaty bones or feed some freeze-dried organs, something that's a little bit more crunchy, freeze-dried fish skins, something like that. So they have something they can crunch on a little bit. They need something to crunch and chew. That's just part of what dogs like to do. So I touched a little bit on people say that high protein is bad for kidney disease and that we need to really restrict protein in our dogs' diets. And this was one of those things that I spouted 35 years ago that I now just want to kick myself. No, dogs need protein. A lot of the dogs with kidney disease are losing protein in their urine. A lot of these dogs with heart disease that secondarily develop protein losing enteropathy, they're losing protein in their stool. They need more protein to keep up. Otherwise, you have muscle wasting. Have you ever seen those old dogs that have been, quote, in kidney failure for years? So they're fed a dry kibble, which is an oxymoron because kidney dogs need moisture. And then they get their protein restricted the minute they develop even the first hint of, look, his urine's a little dilute. Look, his creatinine went up 1/10 of a point. Look, his BUN went up by 2 points. We better start restricting protein. And they get muscle wasting and they die sooner. They need protein. We cannot restrict that protein. The only time I will restrict protein with a kidney dog is like in stage 4 when their BUN is just absolutely uncontrollable, but I'm still not going down to, so normal dry kibble is going to be 23 to 28% protein. And these prescription diets are feeding these dogs 6 to 8% protein. They can't survive on that. You'll get muscle wasting. Their hearts will fail. Everything goes south. It's a bad model. And we know it's a bad model, but traditional veterinarians, they're still being taught in school. Then we'll talk about pancreatitis because that's what we were talking about before we started. People don't understand how to read labels. So you have to look at, are you reading a label that's based on percentages of fat, protein, moisture, et cetera, are based on an as fed or a dry matter basis? Total difference. And you don't have to be able to read that. But if you're comparing the label on a dry kibble to the label on a raw food, consider how much moisture you have in there. And if you take the moisture out when you do that analysis, it's going to make it look like it's a 50% fat food. It's not, because when we look at it on an as-fed basis, it might only be 10 or 12% fat. For instance, the pup loaf that we just did, that is now available commercially through All Provide in the US, the fat percentage came out really low. And somebody emailed me and said, oh my gosh, it's so awful. You used 80% lean meat on that, or beef in that recipe. And I said, did you read the analysis? Because it came out to 7% fat. It is a really low fat diet, even though we used 80% beef. And if we used a 93% beef in that recipe, the fat content would be so low, it would not be compatible with survival. So, it's a matter of understanding what's really in there, which is very complicated for most people. But what I can tell you is that when you have pets with pancreatitis, I get emails multiple times a week or messages, whatever, from people saying, my dog has struggled with pancreatitis. He's been on a low-fat prescription kibble or canned for 2 years, and we keep having repeated bouts of pancreatitis, and I am so strict, and I don't understand why this is happening. It's happening because you have cooked, rancid fats. Cooked, rancid fats are highly pro-inflammatory. Raw fats, no inflammation. They're anti-inflammatory. Look at the ketogenic diets. They are 70% fat, but they're fed raw because raw fats do not cause pancreatitis. And when I first interviewed the people at the Keto Pet Sanctuary and they came up with this and they were feeding all these dogs with cancer 70% fat diets, I said, oh my gosh, you must have to deal with pancreatitis all the time. How do you deal with that? And they said, we've never had a case of pancreatitis. We've had hundreds of dogs. We've never had pancreatitis on a 70% fat diet. So it's a huge myth that this high fat is what's causing the problem. What's causing the problem is rancid fats, and carbohydrates contribute to inflammation. Starchy carbs contribute to inflammation. Obesity is an inflammatory disease. Diabetes is an inflammatory disease. Arthritis is an inflammatory disease. When we take those starchy carbs out, when we take the rancid fats out, when we take the inflammation level in the body from here down to here, pancreatitis is not a problem. Arthritis gets much better. And as my friend Michelle Allen at Monkey's House likes to say, we take an acute condition and we dial it back to a low simmering chronic condition that is not causing outright symptoms, is not causing damage to the dog's body. And it is so totally possible to do that by changing away from the sugars, that's what carbohydrates are, starchy carbs, they're sugar. Just look at human diets that are high in refined flours and sugars. Horrible. And we have all these disease problems that have been studied in depth. We know how much of a problem it is. Our dogs are no different. They cannot thrive on starches that break down to sugars and rancid fats in their diet. Oh, there's Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Judy. Thank you so much. And in bringing it back to really simple terms, and I go back to when I studied human nutrition, and one of the things that really stuck with me was a saying, do not eat anything that your great-great-grandparents would not recognize as food. And that holds, that stands, whether it's humans, whether it's dogs. Our great-great-grandparents would never, there wasn't highly processed foods in those days. So they wouldn't recognize kibble or any of the highly processed foods humans eat as food, but they would recognize meat.
I like that. I may have to steal that from you.
Yes, by all means, take that one. But thank you so much for talking to us today. Don't forget, for those of you listening, there's more to come this month. We've got Dr. Katie Woodley coming to talk to us, the natural pet doctor, next Thursday.
Don't forget Dr. Judy's books. We've got one here. That's a brilliant book for anybody that's just interested in raw feeding and basic recipes in there. But it's also, if you've got any dogs with specific health issues, then tweaked diets in here for the best diets for that particular health issue. It's a brilliant book. Love it. And also, I love this one as well. Needles to Natural. So yeah, if you want to look at a holistic, more approach to your dog's welfare and health, then that is the book as well. So those we'll link those on. I think they're all available on Amazon.
Yeah, we've got some resources here. So the team are going to share all the links in the comments. So if you do feel inspired by this conversation to go away and ditch the dry, or perhaps you've just got a tiny spark of interest just to learn a bit more, there's loads of resources that we've got on hand for you. So we've got Dr. Judy's books that Alison has just mentioned. So we'll share the links to those in the comments. Also on Dr. Judy's website, she has an online course, which is DIY. Just checking what's the name of your course again? Sorry, Dr.
Mine?
Yes.
Homemade Dog Food 101.
Yes, that's it. So that's over on her website. Also on there as well, she's got some free PDF download guides as well. And there's quite a lot of those, isn't there? So that's all really, really interesting stuff. Like I said, we're going to be sharing all the links to all of this stuff in the comments below. So take a look at that. Dr. Judy's Facebook, she's live pretty much every day, aren't you, on there?
Monday through Friday, pretty much.
Yeah. So check that out. Listening, it'll just carry on giving you that information that you might need just to help you to make that move. We've got our ProDog Facebook group as well, which is the ProDog Rebellion group. So feel free to hop over to that and join. We're in there daily, responding to questions, helping people to navigate the world of raw feeding. It's a great community. We've got some long-term raw feeders in there who are also happy to share their knowledge and expertise as well. And we also do a monthly live in there on various topics as well. We've got our Ditch the Dry landing page, which is on our website. So hop over to that. We've got a competition running this month, so you can win £300 worth of ProDog food, which is plenty to get you started. And like I said earlier, if you do have specific questions, then just message directly. You can message us on Messenger. You can email into our customer service, where our feeding advisors are waiting to help. And like I said before, it doesn't matter if you're making that choice to start your raw feeding journey with ProDog or not. It doesn't matter. If you want to try the DIY homemade approach, or you're perhaps going to another raw feeding company, that doesn't matter to us. If you have got specific questions, if sometimes for people it's just that one question, you just need that answer to just get you over the hurdle and get you started. So message in, and we're waiting to hear from you. So I think that is it. Like I said, please share the live with anybody that you know out there who you think could be interested. Any dog owners you've got in your life who are feeding a dry food diet. And yeah, hopefully together we can share the message wider and help more dogs live their best lives, because ultimately that's what this is all about.
Definitely.
So thank you everyone for
thank you very much
today. Thank you, Dr. Judy, for joining us. And take